What is going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the California Underground Podcast. I am your host, Phil, riding solo tonight. Oh, forgot to mention the tagline: the most trusted podcast for all things California politics. Riding solo tonight, but it doesn't mean we don't have a lot to talk about tonight. There is certainly a lot to talk about. Happy to be back on IG tonight with a lot of you people who might remember back in the day when we did coffee in California politics. That was an OG thing. That was like an OG COVID California Underground thing. I was like back when I had like 2,000 followers on IG. We used to do coffee in California politics every Wednesday. So it's nice to be back on IG for tonight. With that said, we are live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, I think at this point, and IG tonight. So if there's anything that you guys want to talk about, if there's anything you want to bring up, I will do my best to check all of the chats and make sure that I'm keeping up. There's, how many chats am I trying to keep track of? So if there's any comments, questions, stuff like that you want to talk about, that's why we do an interactive podcast, and that's why we do it live, is because we love when the audience kind of joins us in the conversation and engages with us. And this is really your time to kind of use this as a platform to ask questions and be curious about California politics. And we have a lot to get to tonight. We're going to talk about the one big beautiful bill, the one big beautiful bill. It's one big, really big, beautiful bill, most beautiful bill you've ever seen. We're going to talk about that for a little bit because I do have some thoughts, good and bad, regarding the one big beautiful bill. There's some good stuff and there's some not some good stuff that I'm, a little hesitant about, but we'll get to that. We're also going to be talking about Karen Bass deleting a lot of text messages right around the time of the wildfires, like what was going on. This is stuff that communications you can request. We'll get into that. That is against the law to delete those text messages and those communications. And then finally, we're going to get into the struggle in Sacramento. Newsom is backing off a lot of the free healthcare for undocumented citizens here in California. And then California Democrats are now coming out and saying, nope, not so fast, Mr. Newsom. We would like to continue that, even if that includes new taxes. So we're going to get to all of that tonight. And again, if you're on YouTube, Rumble, all those places, feel free to let me know your comments, questions, and all of that stuff. So let's get started right away. We'll talk about the big, beautiful bill. Okay, so this happened last night. I'm going to read a little bit from Zero Hedge as soon as I pull this up for all of you. Let's see. Boop, 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 boom. So this was passed late last night. They were up very late. The House of Representatives, the Republicans, they passed the one big beautiful bill. And this is what Donald Trump said. I'm not going to read the whole thing in his entire voice because it gets a little long. He said on Truth Social, the one big beautiful bill has passed the House of Representatives, arguably the most significant piece of legislation that will ever be signed in the history of our country. Not sure about that, but okay, there's been a lot of other legislation that's been signed, probably more consequential. The bill includes massive tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, tax deductions when you purchase an American-made vehicle, along with strong border security measures. There's also talking about the Trump savings account. Democrats lost control of themselves, are aimlessly wandering around, no confidence, grit, or determination. They don't realize that these things and so many more like them will never happen again. So obviously Trump taking a victory lap on this bill passing late last night. It was a multi-trillion-dollar tax package, as we said, already known as the Big Beautiful Bill, cleared the House in a last-minute 214 vote on Thursday morning. It's now going to go over to the Senate. Faces a little bit of an uphill battle over there because I think they have to get over like 60 votes over there. So it's not going to be as quite easy. And they probably aren't expecting this until July, that it's, even if it passes, if it's going to end up on Donald Trump's desk. It aims to prevent a year-end tax hike and potential debt default by would significantly increase the near-term federal deficit. So Let's see. Some of the big things that came out of this, there's a lot of good things, and I'm going to talk about a couple bad things. And in my personal opinion, about the one big beautiful bill, it says the extension of Trump era tax cuts and new relief, such as exempting tips and overtime from taxation. Good. Um, I'm sure that will be, legislated back over time by lobbyists and stuff like that. But for now, it's a campaign promise that Donald Trump had. He said I was going to do no tax on tips and overtime. Great, I love that. I mean, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe it starts with tips and overtime on your income, and then sooner or later, people are going to say, why do we pay any tax on our income? Why do we do any of that? So maybe that will start to seep into people's minds. The state and local tax deduction cap will be increased to $40,000 with phase outs for high earners. So that was basically if you paid state and local taxes, you could deduct those from your federal taxes. They lowered it all the way down to $10,000. Obviously, a lot of people in like high tax states here, like here in California, were getting upset because they're paying a lot in California taxes and they weren't able to deduct it from their federal taxes, which can result in a big federal tax bill. So they've now increased it to $40,000. It was $10,000. Cuts to safety net programs such as Medicaid and food stamps, alongside new work requirements starting in December 2026. Rollbacks on clean energy tax credits, boosting fossil fuel incentives. Major increases in military and border security spending. New taxes targeting elite universities, e.g. Harvard and other Ivy Leagues, and immigrant remittances. The elimination of Ivy tax credits replaced by interest deductions on U.S.-built vehicle loans. There was also something I believe I saw that they got in there, which was they got rid of the transfer tax on suppressors. So Second Amendment people, rejoice about that. That's pretty exciting. Here's my problem. If you look at this graph right here, this is the big problem. So I'm all in favor of tax cuts. I think tax cuts are great for the economy. I think taxes are a burden on us. I hope we start going down the road of maybe slowly getting rid of a lot of taxes, because I don't think we need as many taxes, especially when you think about prime example here in California, we get taxed to death, and somehow all of our cities and our state are completely in the red. So it just goes to show you, it doesn't matter how much you tax, these politicians, when they're given too much money, will end up just squandering it away. We'll talk about that in a little bit in a different story. So this is the big, beautiful bill will massively increase near-term deficits and add $5 trillion in debt. Not great. Okay, we're already over $36 trillion in debt, and then this is going to add another $5 trillion in debt. There was a slow auction. I don't want to get really like too wonky for you guys of what's going on here, but there was an auction the other day. I think it was yesterday, for Treasury bonds. So basically, when the market looks at this, if Treasury bonds at an auction don't sell really well, that's a signal to the market that investors are not really quite as sure or confident in American policies, economic policies going forward. They don't feel like they want to buy American debt because, well, you keep raising debt and you keep piling on more debt. How do we know at the end of the day our Treasury bonds in 30 years are actually going to get paid back? So obviously there's not going to be a lot of people who rush to buy bonds if there is this looming forewarning, looming debt crisis that nobody seems to really want to address. Now, Thomas Massie was one representative who voted no. And this is where people say, like, oh, Thomas Massie, such a sellout, he always votes with the Democrats. But he doesn't vote with the Democrats because he believes what Democrats are saying. Democrats are voting with the way they are because they hate Donald Trump. Thomas Massie is basically coming out and saying, look, this is all fine and dandy. I'm for tax cuts. I love tax cuts. Let's cut back as much as possible. But if you're not cutting the spending, then we're really going to be in trouble. And I think right now, they didn't give you a final number. I had to do some research because this is a reconciliation bill, meaning it's not like a straight like budget. And I'm not going to get really too wonky in terms of like the federal policy here. So there's not really a firm number. It's probably around like $6.5 trillion of spending, which, keep in mind, like before COVID was almost half of what we were paying now. I mean, COVID spiked everything up because of these relief bills and the payouts and telling everyone to stay home and all the loans and all that stuff. We got to get it back under what it was before COVID. I mean, we've got a long way to go, and they're not even really close to this. So one problem I see right now is that this bill looks to cut 1.5 trillion from the federal budget over 10 years. Now, I would argue that's not even good enough, because you should probably be cutting 1.5 trillion this year. Like, there's probably 1.5 trillion of waste right now in the budget. So the fact that they're saying, oh, over 10 years we'll get to 1.5 trillion, you'll add on like another how many trillions of dollars before that 10 years. If we're adding on another 5 trillion every single year based on these spending projections, you're going to be how much more in debt because of the fact that you haven't cut spending. So that is one big issue I really have with this. Is tax cuts are great. I'm in favor of the tax cuts. Love tax cuts. I will stand by this. It has been proven time and time again, no matter how much leftist economists want to try and tell you that this is not how it works. This is how it works. It is so simple. When you leave people to have more money in their pocket, people will use that money to spend in the economy. And when they use that money to spend in the economy does better. So I'm not sure that any sort of fancy falutin doctorate in economics can really refute the fact that when people have more money in their pocket, they can go spend more money and the economy gets better. Simple as that. I don't know how you refute that. There's always a lot of leftist economists like, oh, well, these tax cuts are for the rich and blah, 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 and they're for corporations. And hey, if the corporation that you work for is seeing their corporate tax rate go from 21% down to 15%, that helps you as an employee, because there's profits that they can then reinvest into the company with salaries and bonuses and stuff like that. But getting ahead of myself, that's really one of my biggest issues here, is that it doesn't cut enough. There wasn't a lot of the Doge cuts. Specifically, they said a lot of Doge stuff was included, but it wasn't really anything specifically like outlined of like, this is what Doge said and this is what we're kind of including. So basically, yay tax cuts, like the tax cuts. Boo increased spending. Like, we're still spending an exorbitant amount of money, and we really need to rein that in. So that's like, okay, there's campaign promises that were met. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, stuff like that. But there was this huge opportunity missed regarding not cutting the spending as much as I was expecting they were going to cut it. And they need to cut it really, really quickly, because we are hurtling towards catastrophe financially as a country. We are hurt. I don't know how like this gets like people. This is like when people just kind of they don't open the credit card statement, and they just figure like, if I don't look at the credit card amount and I know I still have stuff on there and I can keep doing it, I'm just going to keep spending until it gets to a point where you've maxed out the credit card, and then you can't spend, and then you're in trouble and you can't pay it all back. That's where we're at right now. I brought this up on NBC when they asked me to come on and talk about Trump's first 100 days. Was someone's got to open the credit card statement, and someone's got to look at this and go, we have spent way too much money. There's way too much waste. There's way too much fraud and abuse. We cannot be what's probably going to be $40 trillion in debt at this point without a plan to pay it down. And I don't see a plan to pay it down. That has to get paid down. Either there's one of two ways this goes down, and neither are pretty for Americans. Either one, the United States of America defaults on its debt, which would be catastrophic to the United States of America. Or two, they raise taxes to pay off this debt. Neither of those are great options. So unless the federal government says we have to really kind of rein in spending, and it looks like they haven't. It looks like congressional Republicans, did the old, hey, here's your tax cuts, but we're going to keep spending as much as possible. That's where we're at. So not happy with the fact that we're spending like a drunken sailor. Not happy about that. Happy about tax cuts. I don't know if it'll be the, as he says, the most beautiful, incredible bill ever in the history of bills ever signed in American history. That's exactly the most beautiful bill. I don't know if it's going to be that level of, I don't think it's going to be that level of incredible. It's going to be nice. I mean, tax cuts are great. I like to see a booming economy. Everyone likes tax cuts. So, all right. On to our next topic tonight. Karen Bass. Karen Bass, mayor of LA. We all know she had this horrible, horrible handling of the wildfires in LA early this year. We don't need to really go over all the story, but I'm going to just give you a little background to begin with. Karen Bass, mayor of LA, big wildfire started. She was in Ghana, right? She was in Ghana for some, I'm not really quite sure, dinner or something. She was away. Basically, she was not in LA at the time that there was a risk of wildfires. This all broke out. She then had to rush back to LA. Now, during that time, you can imagine that she was probably communicating with her staff a lot because you're halfway around the world in Ghana and you need to know what's going on as the mayor of LA. So what do? Well, you can call people, you can email people. Most likely you're texting people. You're texting people back and forth. That's the number one way people communicate nowadays is they text. Now, when you text as public employees, that's a public record because we as voters are supposed to know what you're talking about, what went into your decisions. Why did it take you so long? Why were you in Ghana? Why did you go to Ghana before you knew there was going to be an issue? So that's where we're at, right? Those communications. So now we have LA Times has gone out. Let me see if I can pull this up. This is actually from Breitbart, but I'm going to pull this up right now. Hold on. Give it a second. Give it a second. There we go. So this is from Breitbart. LA Times. Karen Bass is deleting her text messages. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass is deleting her text messages, thus defeating efforts by media organizations to obtain them as government communications subject to public records requests, according to the Los Angeles Times. The Times reported that it had been unable to obtain Bass's text messages concerning her overseas trip to Ghana, during which the LA fires broke out, because they were automatically deleted and the city had not retained them. The Times reported she and her office have said that she was in constant communication during that period, but it's impossible to know exactly what she was communicating because her messages were not saved, according to a city lawyer. Her phone is not set to save. Her phone is set not to save text messages, said the lawyer, David Michelson. Michelson said there is no requirement that a city official or employee save text messages, despite the fact that the city's own document retention policies dictate that the most records should be kept for at least 2 years. The Times suggests that Bass is violating both state law and the city's own administrative code. So the fact that, I mean, I guess this might have been the same attorney for LAHSA who said, oh, it was a mistake or an administrative oversight that I signed 3 checks equaling over $2 million that went to my husband's nonprofit. Must be the same attorney, and probably all the same attorney who come up with these crazy excuses. This is against the law. I'm going to say this right now. This is against the law here in California. Let me take a sip of water because I want to make sure I get this. This is against the law in California. There's something called the California Public Records Act under Government Code Section 6250, which means that people who are public employees are bound to hold on to records so that the people who vote for you, have a right to look at the stuff that you're doing and talking about. Now, you can make a public records request. That is something that you can do. You can do it pretty easily. It's now just a form that you fill out. How long they take to get back to you might be a whole different story. But you can do that. So, for example, I can go in and request of San Diego County. I can say, hey, give me your communications on this subject between these time periods. Usually they're supposed to comply. If you make it pretty reasonable to say, hey, can you give me this stuff? I'm looking specifically at maybe this topic between these time periods. I want to see what was going on. They have to comply with that. That is part of the California Public Records Act. And that is it's like a Freedom of Information Act. Like when you make a FOIA request, it's sort of the same thing. The California Supreme Court, this was 2017, recently held in the city of San Jose versus Superior Court, California Supreme Court, that public employees' digital messages existing in private electronic devices, e.g., I keep getting that wrong, e.g., IG, smartphones and computers, or in personal messaging accounts, are presumptively open to public disclosure under the California Public Records Act. Under the courts holding, digital messages constitute public records and subject to disclosure under the CRPA if they are written by a public employee and they substantially relate to public business. If these two requirements are met, a message is a public record, even if it exists largely in a single public employee's device or deemed retained by the agency. So, okay. Basically, Karen Bass is now coming out with this excuse that they don't save the text messages. It hasn't been that long. All right, let's start right there. It hasn't been that long that she should be deleting or having her phone automatically delete text messages, right? You are the mayor of Los Angeles, probably the second biggest city in America. Like you're not mayor of a tiny little town. You're the mayor of Los Angeles. You did not know, or no one advised you that all of your stuff, all of your records, all of your text messages are public record and that people have to have access to them or can have access to them. That was never discussed, right? So now, conveniently, when the LA Times is trying to do a story on this, now all of a sudden they're coming back and saying, no, we don't have those text messages because Karen Bass's phone automatically deleted them. Great. I mean, that's a great excuse. The dog ate my homework. Why not? I guess we're all supposed to just wipe our hands and go, yep, that's good enough for us. I guess her phone automatically deletes it. But it's different if it's, for example, my phone. If it's my phone as a private citizen, I set it to delete every 30 days because I just get tired of having 1,000 text messages that take up space on my phone. There's a big difference between that and the mayor of Los Angeles, especially during a time that the city was going through one of its most catastrophic natural disasters in history. Like this, you should be making sure that, I should probably not delete these because somebody's probably going to come looking for these. They think that if they just delete them, the problem will go away. Right? They just think that, we don't want them to see what we were texting about, so we'll just delete them. Which to me makes it sound like, what's the first thing you think? You're hiding something. You're absolutely hiding something, because if you don't have anything to hide, why would you delete those text messages? And it looks fishier if the LA Times is showing up and going, hey, doing a story, California Public Records request, can we get those text messages? And they go, we don't have them. They automatically deleted. What? And this is why the LA Times is suing, because you're supposed to actually hold on to these text messages. You're fueling the fire, right? Like it's one of those things where you're making it worse. It would have been better if you just held on to them, no matter how bad those text messages were. If you had just held on to them and I mean, disclose them. I mean, even if they were bad, this looks way worse. Combine this with what's going on with LAHSA. I keep saying this. I don't know what people in LA are doing. I think there's a recall going on, but there should absolutely be 100% a recall going on, because Karen Bass has done nothing but show how absolutely incompetent she is to run the city of Los Angeles, right? And between this and LAHSA, where millions of dollars had gone missing because she was friends with the CEO of LAHSA, and she wasn't not necessarily qualified, and she was hiring unqualified people, and then she's whining about the fact that she can't use taxpayer funds to pay for her open bar at a holiday party. Like, I have a feeling, and I'm not a fortune teller, but I have this weird feeling that 2025 is not going to be a great year for Karen Bass. Like, I have this weird feeling things are going to get a lot worse. I feel like she's probably going to get served with this recall. She might get kicked out of office. I mean, there's a good chance she gets kicked out of office based on the fact that between she's hiding these text messages of what's going on with the wildfires, not to mention we don't really know what's going on with the wildfires anymore. People don't really even talk about it, except for our friend Luke Melchior, who came on the show a while ago, who still posts updates. Thank you to Luke. Nobody really talks about what's going on in LA anymore. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, we all showed up, we did our photo ops, blah, 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 and now nobody knows what's going on anymore. If you are looking for like updates on what's going on with the wildfires, definitely follow Luke. He is Luke Melchior. It's Melchior, M-E-L, spelled choir, C-H-O-R-O-I-R. He's giving a ton of updates and keeping everyone updated on what's going on with the rebuilding effort up in LA. So if you're curious, definitely go check out Luke. He was also on the show a couple months back right after that. But like, you know what? You're not helping your cause if you are deleting text messages around a very contentious time where everybody in the world is going, why were you in Ghana? Well, what are you doing in Ghana that's so much more important than being here in LA? So, Karen Bass, what are you hiding? That's all I got to ask. What are you hiding? What incompetence are you hiding with those text messages being deleted? You're only making it worse for you, Karen. So, all right. Everyone out there who's tuning in, make sure you, if you are listening, comment, question, stuff like that. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in right now, who's on YouTube, Rumble, all of that stuff. Instagram, I see a lot of people joining on Instagram, so thank you for joining on Instagram. I think someone says, I think the Karen Bass scandal is going to get swept under the rug. You know, I don't think it's going to get, if the LA Times is going after her, that's not a good sign. Like the LA Times, I think this is right. They decided not to endorse any. They didn't endorse Kamala Harris or something. I think if the LA Times is doing this right now, I think that means she's in trouble. Like the LA Times is doing real journalism now, which is pretty crazy. They're actually doing real journalism. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. They will try, and this might be more emblematic, I guess, or symbolic of the hubris and cockiness of California Democrats right now, is they believe because they have so much power and they have so much, they have the supermajority, have all this power, they run everything, they can get away with everything. I don't think that's lasting as long as they think it did. I mean, think about people who've been recalled recently, right? Like London Bree she wasn't recalled, but she was voted out of office for Daniel Lurie. Pamela Price, who was up in Alameda County, she was recalled. The DA of San Francisco was recalled. George Gascon was voted out for what was essentially a Republican district attorney. There's a lot of stuff going on where these entrenched far left Democrats, these statist Democrats, are not as safe as I think they once thought they were. And that's where I think it's getting interesting, because I don't think I don't think enough people are going to fall on their sword for Karen Bass. Let's put it that way. Gavin Newsom's not going to fall on his sword for Karen Bass. And I think there's a lot of people who are not going to fall on their sword for Karen Bass. Someone said she's doing some face saving lately. I think she knows she's in trouble. There was a story I saw that she was in Malibu at a steakhouse, and I guess she was, having a good time at this steakhouse, everything, and it was Malibu, and somebody just lost it. They were like, I can't believe that you're here. Like, you have a job to do. Malibu is gone, basically burned to the ground, and you're sitting here yucking it up at a steakhouse. I mean, Karen Bass can go to a restaurant. But it looks bad. Like, it's these dumb mistakes where she thinks she's above it. And therefore she doesn't have to answer to people. Like, oh, I can go to a fancy steakhouse in Malibu and not get called out. Someone says it needs to be said, so thank you for saying it. Well, that's the point. That's why I'm here, folks. I'm here to say the things that you want us to say. Somebody commented on YouTube, I'm so pissed. I will not be paying for free healthcare. We pay so much now in taxes. I'm going to say, screw these crooks. All right. Well, that's a perfect segue into our next story. All right. Next story. California, a couple years ago, decided, and I'd done a whole podcast on this. Ironically, the last time I did a solo podcast, I did a whole thing about this. That I'd say actually, the politicians in charge, slowly implemented and slowly rolled out over time what was free healthcare for undocumented citizens. It started with children, and then it started with people over 80, and then pretty soon, before you knew it, Gavin Newsom signed into law that they would allow for basically everybody to get access to medi-cal, which is, our state-sponsored healthcare system, so that if you're low income or something like that, you can get access to healthcare. He signed it so that basically, no matter what age, no matter what your immigration status was, you can sign up for medi-cal. A couple months ago, while this all sounded great, right? This all sounds amazing. I don't think it sounds amazing. To them, it sounds amazing. It sounds amazing in virtue signaling. Again, I don't think this sounds great. They thought, I'm going to sign this. I look so woke. I look so incredible. I'm such a champion. This is a perfect example of when virtue signaling crashes headfirst into reality. I'm doing the Trump hands right now. It's a virtue signal right into reality. And this is what happened. No more than a year after this happened, it was determined that medi-cal was essentially broke. That there were so many people who signed up for medi-cal. There were so many undocumented citizens who signed up for free healthcare, taxpayer-funded healthcare, that it broke the system. They were literally broke a couple months ago. Think about that. In a year, they overblew the budget and broke medi-cal. That Governor Newsom had to go to the legislature. And at first it was, I need a couple billion. I'm saying a couple billion like it's like nothing. I need a couple billion to cover this hole to pay bills for medi-cal for this month, right? Just for that month for $2 billion. Then the number went up to $6 billion just to cover bills for that month. And this is how broken it was. And again, this was something Gavin Newsom had brought in. This is something he signed. This is something he supported. And now he's dealing with the ramifications of the fact that it is way over budget. And anybody, again, you don't need to have a doctorate in economics from Stanford or something to understand that if you promise more people services than you can budget for, your budget will go broke. I mean, it's simple as that. If your budget is to cover this many people based on your tax revenues, well then, if you increase that amount of people and the budget stays the same, you're not going to have money to cover everybody. That's the bottom line. But of course, California Democrats love more than anything. They love to virtue signal. They love to come off as these incredible people. They don't like to face reality. They're definitely not looking at this from a real perspective of numbers and dollars and cents. They're looking at this as how many political points can I score with your tax dollars? That's basically what they do. They go, how many points can I score with your tax dollars? So that's the background of where we're at. May has now come around. As part of the budget process, the governor proposes a budget, right? And the May revision is usually he puts out a budget at the beginning of the year. It's kind of rough. They kind of go back and work on it. May is closer to what the final budget is supposed to be because June 15th is the deadline that they have to get the budget passed. That's how our year works for California. It starts in June, ends in June, starts in June. So Gavin Newsom released his revised budget, keeping in mind that he just caught hell for all of this just a month or so ago. And he came out, and we have a video, and we'll watch that. And yeah, we'll discuss after that.
Well, a new tax, cuts to other state services. These are things that are now being talked about here at the state capitol as some lawmakers try to continue providing health care to undocumented people at the scale that California has been. As we've been reporting, state leaders ended up spending a lot more money than they thought they would on this program. This year alone, to cover 1.6 million undocumented people, California taxpayers are spending about $11 billion. The state next year is expecting to spend even more. To address that, the governor proposed capping the program, no longer allowing undocumented adults to sign up starting in 2026.
I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop you right there. No new signups for undocumented adults starting in 2026. It is only May of 2025, right? Only May of 2025. So if you give this much of a runway, so let's say in June, let's say they pass this budget based on what Gavin Newsom's saying, right? This is what they're going to say. Okay, 2026. That's after that, you can't sign up for this program anymore. So all the undocumented who wanted to sign up for this, you better sign up right now. So that's let's see. Well, June is half a month, so we'll say July, August, September, October, November, December. It's 6 months. 6 months that you are giving runway and a headway to people to sign up for it. So if you didn't sign up for it this time, you better rush and sign up for it now. And you better believe there are going to be activists out there who are telling people that you should sign up for this before the deadline. And nothing gets people off their butts to sign up for something knowing that they have to get it done or they lose it. So the fact that this is right now, not until 2026, you've given them a 6-month window, which I would only assume is going to backfire because you can't cover the people that you are paying right now. We've already proven that 1 year into this, you can't pay for the people that you are covering right now. So you propose give them 6 months to sign up even more people, even more thousands and thousands of people. And you're still back at square one where you don't have the budget, you can't make it, and more people are going to rush to sign up for this. So already off to a horrible start. And the monthly premium of $100, like, okay, is that going to, what is that supposed to do? I'm not sure what the $100 is supposed to do. So let's keep watching.
And for those who are already signed up, the governor proposes a monthly $100 premium. This would not have an impact on kids. The issue is that the federal government helps pay for Medicaid costs for low-income Californians. In fact, the federal government provides California with more than half of those health care funds. But the federal government will not reimburse the state for costs associated with undocumented immigrants. The Democratic Latino Legislative Caucus held this press conference today, blatantly rejecting the governor's proposal to make changes. The caucus did not provide any specific solutions. They said everything should be on the table, including a new tax to help pay for those costs.
We've got to assess everything. We're saying we've got to be reasonable about this approach. We have to stop the narrative on vilifying immigrants.
The rhetoric, what they want you to believe is that our community is at fault for the deficit in our state's budget, but it's not.
Well, you certainly aren't helping. This policy certainly is not helping. Let's just put it that way. I'm going to stop you right there. Also, the sign, if you're not watching and you're listening on audio, says, our patients' rights have no borders. Let's just think about that for a second. Our patients' rights have no borders. Basically, these California Democrats that you see right here, they have their nice little, they have their little podium set up there. They're very upset. They're very upset that they can't pander to people anymore, that they can't give away free stuff, that they can't do that anymore, or that they're proposing they can't do that anymore. They have a sign that says our patients' rights have no borders when it comes to free healthcare that taxpayers of California are paying for. They're basically saying that we as Californians and we taxpayers should be paying for anybody in the world who wants free healthcare. Anybody in the world. There's no borders. Not outside the borders of California. There's no borders. If you want healthcare, California will pay for it. This lady tries, I'm trying to see who this is. This is Caroline Menjivar, Van Nuys state senator. She's saying that, it's not our fault that there's a budget deficit. Well, this ain't helping. That's for sure. Let's just put it out there. There's a lot of reasons why there's a budget deficit, but borrowing $6 billion in 1 month because you can't pay for the healthcare for every single person in California, undocumented or not, certainly not helping. So let's keep watching.
What is happening year after year after year is that entities, businesses are getting away with providing a less than livable wage, or getting away with forcing their employees to have a part-time schedule, forcing them into our state's driven medi-cal program.
Now, California this year also has a Republican Hispanic Legislative Caucus. We checked in with members there, some who tell us that the health care was a promise that the governor could not keep. Assemblyman Josh Hoover is one of those members. Here's what he had to say about a possible new tax that the Democrats are floating.
The idea that they would even consider a tax increase to cover these services, I think it just shows where California's priorities are. We are, the governor, to his credit, is trying to be a little bit more responsible. We cannot, in good conscience, continue to cover those programs while cutting IHSS and cutting foster youth programs and all these other priorities in California.
Over the next month or so, this will be one of, if not the biggest debate as California lawmakers and the governor try to nail down the state spending plan for the upcoming year. Reporting at the state capitol, Ashley Zavala, KCRA 3 News.
Federal lawmakers are still in the process of deciding possible cuts to the Medicaid program. The result of that could also impact how the state moves forward with health care for undocumented people.
All right. So, as we know, as of today, there were cuts to Medicaid, and obviously this administration is not going to be, how do I say, sympathetic to giving free health care through medi-cal to undocumented citizens. The big headline here that to take away, and I that state senator who brought this up, good on you for giving the California Republicans more life to flip seats. Okay. It's already bad enough. And I just wrote an article on my Substack, which I've been writing more blog articles. So go check those out. Substack. Go check that out. Basically, how low can California Democrats go? AB 379, which we talked about, was this whole debate over should we include a felony charge for those who try to solicit sex from those who are 16 or 17 years old. And for some reason, California Democrats, some of them were like, no, I don't think it should be a felony. It should be a misdemeanor or a wobbler or something like that. Now you have this state senator out there crowing about, well, it's not our fault that there's a budget deficit. This is clearly not the problem. Forget the fact that it was already broke 2 months ago, and that we had to borrow $6 billion from the general fund just to pay bills for 1 month. But it's not our fault. It's not our fault that there's a budget deficit. The fact that this whole program is going under and it's completely broken. She may have provided one of the greatest campaign talking points for California Republicans going into 2026, when there are vulnerable seats out there, meaning if you're chipping away at the supermajority between AB 379 and now this, you are just feeding into great talking points for California Republicans. Because imagine posting that all over in battleground districts here in California. Imagine posting what she said on an attack ad or some sort of PAC ad, basically showing her saying, look, we don't believe this program should go away. We need to protect our constituents. Mind you, they are undocumented, so are they voting? Like they're not voting, right? They're undocumented. They shouldn't be voting, so they're not really your constituents. They're not your voting constituents. But put that reel out there of her saying we'll do whatever it takes, even it means a new tax to pay for free health care for every undocumented citizen here in California. Run that on the airwaves, on the radio, on YouTube ads, on TV. Run that all through 2026. If I was running the California GOP, I would run that and AB 379 continuously in California, just continuously, that they want to propose a new tax just to pay for the free healthcare of undocumented citizens. As if California is already not expensive enough, let's propose a new tax on top of all of it. Oh, hey, what's up? Camille just hopped into the chat. What's up? Co-host in the chat. Let's see. Some people are chiming in. I want to make sure I get this. How low can they go? How low is hell? Well, I mean, when you're protecting people who are buying children for the purposes of sex, I don't know if it could get any lower than that. California Democrats repealing Prop 13 is the bottom. They have been trying to chip away at that for a long time. Trump should send DOJ to audit where all the Fed's money has gone. What about the $40 billion EDD that was stolen to win our arrest, seize assets from criminals? Yeah, there was probably way. I mean, if anything, DOJ should start going after all the COVID relief funds. So, Newsom is the problem. All America knows that. Yeah, well, he brought this on himself. He started this. Okay, YouTube. See, I'm bouncing around, people. So tell me, what's the gas prices there now? I don't know. I drive a Tesla, so I don't know what gas prices are right now. $5, $5.50. Anybody in the chat? All right. So again, I want to go back to that and just say, use that as the footage and the talking point going into 2026. That and AB 379. This lady, this kind of all is a theme, right? This is absolutely a theme of this hubris of believing that you are invincible. You are invincible because you have so much power and you're the one party state. You have so much power and no one's going to question your authority. So you know what? If we demand we want a new tax on the plebes because we want to pay for this healthcare, you're just going to have to sit there and take it and no one's going to push back. Well, I got news for you. You might have just written one more little notch that's going to knock the California Democrats down a peg coming up the next election. And Josh Hoover is a smart guy, friend of the show. Love you, Josh. Need to get Josh back on very soon. He's a good one. Always keep an eye on what Josh Hoover's saying up there. All right. There are some other things I want to talk about regarding this whole thing. Largest expenditure in California, right? So going back to what that state senator, her name already is escaped you, Caroline Ninjavar or something, Ninjavar. She said this is not the reason why there's a budget deficit. I would say is probably a good part of it. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of things of why there is a budget deficit, but you're probably a big part of it. You might not be the only thing. Just gonna say you might not be the only thing. But for sure, you're part of it. You're a big part of it. The biggest part of the California state budget, so broken down, the California state budget, the biggest sector that we spend money on is health and human services, with the general fund expenditures estimated at $85.6 billion. I think our total is something around $300 billion. So just keep that in mind. $86.5 billion. And I think it's around $300 billion is our overall budget. This includes critical programs like medi-cal. Medi-cal, which we're talking about. You broke medi-cal because you are giving free healthcare to all undocumented. Education, while significant, is often split into K through 12, around $80.5 billion, and higher education is $28.1 billion, totaling $186 billion. So already, biggest part of the budget is healthcare here in the state. And when one of your biggest parts of that budget or that part is going bankrupt, again, you don't need a doctorate from Stanford in economics to figure out that if the biggest part of your budget is costing you the most amount of money and causing you to spend more than you budgeted, that might be a reason why you're broke. I mean, personally, if you are doing your own personal finances and you're looking and you go, okay, well, we got to spend this much on gas and we got to spend this much on groceries and we got to spend this much on this. And then all of a sudden there comes along a category and it's like Amazon shopping. And all of a sudden you budget $200 and at the end of the month you look and you spend $1,000 and you go, why do we have no more money at the end of the month? Probably this category right here. Amazon spending over $1,000, $800 over what we budget. That's probably why we don't have any money at the end of the month. So again, to that state senator who says we're not the reason why there's a budget deficit, you might not be the sole reason, but you probably are a big reason why there is one. Okay, there's something else I wanted to talk about. Can we afford to even do this? So there's some stuff I wanted to bring up about fact checking the May budget revision, and this is from the California Policy Center. Also a great site. Go check them out. I believe they're a nonprofit. This just came out a couple days ago. So Governor Spin, I'm just going to read a couple of them. You can go ahead and just look this up. This is at California Policy Center. Governor Spin, Trump's tariffs are to blame for California's revenue declines. He says a significant portion of Newsom's presentation revolved around the challenge of economic uncertainty, which he tried to tie to President Trump's tariff policies. California is once again grappling with a budget deficit now totaling $12 billion. The governor says that uncertainty caused by the Trump administration is the reason California leaders anticipate a $16 billion decline in revenue over the next 2 fiscal years. Fact check, if the final budget bill is close to Newsom's $321.9 billion revised proposal, so I was right, about $300 billion, 320. This would constitute budget growth of over $100 billion since the 2019-2020 budget at the beginning of his term. That's not a tariff problem. It's the result of years of runaway spending, lost revenue from companies fleeing the state, unrealistic promises to public sector unions, and failure to seriously prepare for economic downturns. Another spin related to the topic at hand here regarding the medi-cal. Governor Spin, we're putting a freeze on medi-cal to save costs. To address the budget problem, Newsom proposed a $5 billion freeze on medi-cal expansion, particularly for undocumented immigrants, acknowledging that 1.6 million are now enrolled, a significantly large number than we anticipated, Newsom said. And it's only going to get bigger now that you gave them a deadline of 2026, which is 6 months away. Fact check, this freeze marks one of the biggest surprises in Newsom's budget revision, an admission that the state's medi-cal expansion, particularly for illegal immigrants, has become a serious financial strain. For a governor who once touted this as a cornerstone of California's progressive identity, pulling back is no small shift, but even the proposed modest rollbacks may not be enough to shield the state from billions in potential federal funding cuts. Right, so $5 billion. $5 billion, okay. You borrowed $6 billion for 1 month. Let's do the math here. 1.6 million people are covered by medi-cal. It's probably going to be closer to 2 million by the time 2026 rolls around because you've given them a deadline of hurry up and get there. So now you still can't pay for them, and you've paused it for $5 billion. And you think because you paused it and somehow did the numbers of $5 billion, That's going to fix the hole in the problem that your medi-cal budget is overblown by probably tens of billions of dollars by the end of the year. That's politician math for you. Yeah, it looks fancy. You know, Newsom's over here. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. This looks great. This all looks fancy. $5 billion. But then when you look at the real numbers, you go, wait a second, that doesn't add up. So again, I know I've said it a bunch of times. You don't need to have a doctorate from Stanford in economics. Does Stanford even have a doctorate in economics? I feel like they should have a doctorate in economics program, but I don't know why I keep bringing up Stanford. Bougie, Ivy League, whatever. All right. Most importantly, though, for people who are questioning, well, what does it take to pass a tax in California? This is where it's going to get a little interesting, right? Under the California state constitution, it requires for a new tax, not a fee or anything like that, a new tax to be implemented. You need two-thirds of vote of both chambers in the legislature. So both houses, you know, the Assembly and the Senate. You need 2/3 of both those chambers, or you need 2/3 of voter approval. So they could put this to a people's vote, right? Which, all right, let's play this out strategically for California Democrats. You say you want a new tax, right? You say you want a new tax so you can pay for medi-cal for all undocumented citizens. Let's put on our political consultant hats and think about this for a second. You're California Democrats. You go, look, this is unpopular. People are not a fan of this, right? They don't like this. They don't like the fact that we're talking about a new tax to support undocumented, give free healthcare to undocumented citizens. So what do? We can introduce a bill which would force all of the members of the Assembly and the Senate to put their name and ascribe to it and vote for it. And then we get to see everybody out there. And then that'll be on their record forever. You voted for free healthcare and new taxes for free healthcare for undocumented citizens. That's on your record. Now, if you're California, you know you probably have a good chance you could do that, right? You have a supermajority, so that would be technically the easier path because you do have the numbers to get it passed. But politically, there's the problem of, well, now your name's ascribed to it. And now people can campaign on that. And they can put you in ads. And if you're in a vulnerable district, which also conversely may dwindle the amount of people who actually support it in both these chambers. It may not get past 2/3 because there may be enough moderate Democrats who go, I'm not going to vote for this in my district because I'm in a district that could get flipped. So I'm not going to do that. The alternative is this, and it could be a little bit riskier because you don't really control it as much. They could introduce it as a voter initiative. So the Assembly can introduce something that will then be put towards the voter initiative. So basically, they don't have to worry about signatures and all that stuff. They can just pass it and say, okay, we're going to send this off to the voters. It's going to be a new proposition that you have to vote on. They could do that. They could create this voter initiative, send it out to the voters, let them figure it out. And usually with enough money behind it, because people like, doctors unions and nurses unions and all these unions that benefit from more people getting medical services, all of a sudden are dumping tens of millions of dollars into a campaign to vote to support a voter initiative like this or a proposition like this. Maybe it gets passed that way, and then the voters vote for it, and then people go, well, the voters voted for it. So which way does this go? So there's two paths. Do they go the Assembly and Senate route where they try and pass it the old-fashioned way, 2/3 in both chambers, but you got to put your name to it, and that can be dangerous? Or do you throw it out there as a proposition, give it some fancy name like, looking out for the most whatever vulnerable community? I don't know. Give it something like puppy dogs and rainbows and chocolate chip cookies or something like that. And then people go, well, how do you vote against that? That sounds horrible. Why would it? And then let the rest handle itself. Enough unions, enough associations will dump tens of millions of dollars into it. They'll be able to get enough people to sign on the dotted line and vote for it. Who knows? But that's basically where this is at. If they're serious about adding this new tax, that's really where we're at. So for those who are wondering, how does a new tax get passed? Those are the two options of how it can get passed. Do they move forward with this? Do they maybe go back to the drawing and go, oh, this might have not been a great idea. This doesn't really pull well with a lot of Californians. Maybe we should back off this a little bit. We tried, it didn't work out. Who we heard, like if we back off and just let it be, maybe we can protect our phony baloney jobs. So that's where we're at. But basically, we got a couple minutes left right now. I know most of you people are blowing up the chat right now, and I love that you guys are doing that. California is going to California even when he's out of office. I agree with that. We've talked about that here on the podcast. That I'm actually more worried about the person who comes behind Gavin Newsom, because I don't think they have presidential ambitions. So they might be even more far left. California Redemption Value Fund hasn't been audited in a while. Projected $1 billion collected on that tax. Hey, Phil, if California is somehow able to break the supermajority next year, how confident would you feel about California electing decent representatives? California Republicans as the federal level vote like rhinos. Right. I think representatives, like you're talking about, like in our state legislature or in Congress, because Congress and our state legislature are like two different beasts. I think the California Republicans are doing right now, they're doing a good job holding Democrats' feet to the fire, sticking to common sense policies. On the congressional, I mean, you already heard me talk about the fact that congressional Republicans did not put enough cuts into their budget. They're going to keep spending like drunken sailors. I think there's a good amount of people who are trying to make a difference up in Sacramento. And I think if you're able to break the supermajority up there, I think, we've been lucky enough to talk to a lot of representatives. We've gotten to know them. They're all decent people. They're all really nice people, genuine people that you would like to sit down and have a beer with. So I think they're all, good people. But again, I think it comes down to these issues that are really unpopular. And if California Republicans, who are doing a better job of this, they're doing a much better job of holding California Democrats' feet to the fire. If they campaign on this stuff, then you have a chance of flipping seats. You have a chance of flipping a lot of these seats that are in contention. And then all of a sudden you're chipping away, and then it's a seat here and it's a seat there. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, politics doesn't happen slowly, or it doesn't happen quickly. And a lot of people always are like, oh, let's turn California red overnight. Like, okay, it's not really ever going to happen overnight. It goes through a phase of like, it goes from deep blue, then it's maybe light blue, then it's purple, and then maybe it's light red. Like, that's sort of how it goes. And that happens over time, and it takes electing one representative after another, putting him in the legislature, breaking the supermajority. And before you know it, you look up and you go, whoa, wait a second. Now it's 50-50. When did that happen? California is a whole different state when it's 50-50. I will say that. If it's 50-50 and it's a competitive state where balance of power can go one way or the other, I am telling you, California is a wholly different state. You are not seeing policies. You are not seeing state senators out there screaming and yelling and throwing temper tantrums about taxing citizens to pay for the health care of undocumented citizens. I'm just saying that right now. That policy argument does not get out into the political world if it's a 50-50 world. And that's what you got to start working towards, is you got to work towards 50-50. First, you got to break the supermajority. Break the supermajority and then 50-50. Because once you break the supermajority, there is bargaining power, right? There is bargaining power when you break that supermajority all of a sudden. when you're not in the super majority and you're the super minority, you don't really have any bargaining power. You can't stop anything. You can't hold anything up. You can't really hold your votes for anything. So, yeah, that's why it's important. And that's why I'm wearing my local elections t-shirt, is because this stuff does matter. You know, you got to pay attention to who is voting. All right. Any other comments before I log off? It's been fun hanging out with you guys on IG. Long time. Purple California sounds better than a red California. California, anything. We got to move away from the statism. Got to get away from the statism where we think, you know, it's all virtue signaling and there's an endless pot of money, and people, you know, they're worried about tax revenues now and how much, like, if they're worried about tax revenues right now and dwindling tax revenues, put this tax out there and make people pay for it, and you'll really see dwindling tax revenues, because people will be running towards the exit in California. So, all right, I'm going to end there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. Love when everyone is all chatty and brings it to the live show. It's always a lot of fun. People on YouTube, Rumble, all those places. IG is a lot. I'm looking at, if you could see, I wish you could see like my whole screen right now is like, I got so many different chat windows. I feel like I'm like a day trader right now, looking at all the different chat windows that are up and all the numbers and everything flying by. But anyway, so keep an eye on this. As always, like we do, we will keep you updated of what the next steps are. But we did want to let you know that this is being floated out there. Let's prime you guys up so that you're already aware of the fact that they are thinking about proposing a tax to cover all of this healthcare, this free healthcare for undocumented. So that's what our job is always to do, is to give you guys the information so that you can then go inform others, let other people know, say, hey, we listened to this podcast. You got to check it out. They give you a lot of information. They tell you exactly what's going on. They don't sugarcoat it either as well. They're even at the top of this show. Yeah. I was brutally honest about my thoughts about the one big, beautiful bill, a big, 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 beautiful bill. There's good stuff and there's bad stuff. And that's how we always are on this show, is if there's good stuff and bad stuff, we're going to call it out both ways. We're going to call it like we see it. So with that, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, review. It helps with the algorithm if you're listening on audio. The best thing that you can do is, if you haven't already, leave us a nice review. That helps with the algorithm, helps people find us as well. And the best thing you can do to support the show is, well, you can get a nice local election shirt, or local elections matter shirt. That's always a nice shirt. One of my favorite shirts. Yes, we made it in the style of BLM so that it gets nice double looks by people. Go there, CaliforniaUnderground.live. You can go check out our merch over there. But the best way you can support the show that is 100% free is just let somebody know. Just tell them, hey, you should check out this podcast, because you know what? You're a Californian and you should stay informed. So check it out. And with that, we'll see you on the next one. Later, everybody.